Good portents one and all, and welcome to the Big Friendly Goliath. Today we're doing a quick guide for all the classes of Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition with special consideration for beginners. Put most succinctly, your character's class defines what your character does and how they do it. This video is meant as a general overview of the 12 official classes, plus the Artificer. Later on we'll cover unofficial and homebrew classes, but right now let's stick with the starting lineup. This is intended to help beginners narrow down the classes they're considering playing or give them a bit of insight into classes they may not understand. I'm also going to give each class 2 tier rankings: magical simplicity and ease of use for beginners. First off, the Artificer, the master of magical invention. This class uses a combination of personal ingenuity and learned magical knowledge to create fantastic things, a skill known as Artifice. There's an Artificer that really loved Chem class, an Artificer that gets their own Robo-Pet, an Artificer that spent their free time building homemade cannons, and the crowd favorite D&D Iron Man. The Artificer is an intelligence-based class, something that D&D sorely needs more of, and they're a partial magic caster whose spell list largely borrows from the wizards and the clerics, aka 2 of the best spell lists in the game, so they can bring a lot of clutch utility. In fact, a party will almost certainly adore their Artificer for the versatility they bring, but even more so if they share any of the magical infusions they get, a key feature that allows the Artificers to create their own magical items that do incredibly powerful things. Overall, Artificers aren't exactly the easiest to play for beginners. They have some degree of magical complexity, so they land in about the C tier of each category. But they're a blast to play, so if you're interested in it, check out Tasha's Cauldron of Everything. The rest of the classes here are considered official and therefore can be found in the player's handbook. Next, the Barbarian, a truly classic archetype and perhaps the most singularly iconic, second only to the Wizard, who only gets there by way of the big pointy hat. Barbarians are primal warriors that often shun the niceties of society for a simpler, more brutal lifestyle. Their origins might vary widely, but they're all unified by one key concept: rage. Barbarians harness unrelenting ferocity to resist harm and decimate their foes. Barbarians focus on their strength score, but they also have some key reliance on their constitution. Out of battle, they're really good at lifting, pulling, and pushing stuff, as well as opening and scaring things. A blast to roleplay, they're almost always a table favorite and pretty universally considered easy to pick up for anybody. So much so that they land in the S tier of magical simplicity and ease of use for beginners. So if you're brand new to the game, but the rules might seem a little much, a little overwhelming at the outset, or you just like the idea of being a strength-based character with a large weapon and sometimes limited clothing, go give it a glance. It's an amazing class. Next, the Bard. The Bard is a master of performance and magic. In the multiverse of Dungeons & Dragons, bards can affect the universal weave of mystical force known as magic by tapping into its essence and channeling it through words, music, and other forms of artistic expression. Bards are all adept at versatility and often touted for their breadth of useful skills. They excel at playing the face of the party or the person who talks to the non-player characters in hopes of gaining useful information or simply bending them to the party's will. Bards are also marvelous support characters, buffing their allies with a beloved keynote feature known as inspiration. Bards also lean heavily into charisma, but need dexterity to stay alive and nimble. Bards are full spellcasters with a pretty hefty spell list, so they're solidly in the B to C tier for magical simplicity, but they are still very playable for beginners, so they land in the A tier for ease of use. Next, the Cleric. Traditionally, clerics are holy warriors and mortal conduits of divine magic. Clerics are especially powerful in D&D 5th edition as they're sort of the only class that gets access to all the best healing spells, so if hoping to keep your party alive sounds like a good idea, this would be right up your alley. Clerics also get the best buffing spells to support your allies, as well as the best debuffing spells that piss off your enemies, and even a few totally banging damage spells to round out the list. Be warned, there are approximately 37 different types of clerics. Just kidding, there are 14, and they run the gamut of divine representation, devoted to stuff like magic, death, life, light, knowledge, nature, war, peace, trickery, and even the most pleasant time of day. They're also a full spellcaster, therefore their magic isn't the simplest. But that being said, clerics are hardy and extremely powerful, and really not that complicated, so newer players might do well to consider them, landing them in the A tier of ease of use. Next, the Druid. Druids are protectors of nature, acting as conduits for primal magic. They can conjure a storm, shape water and earth, call upon wolves or geese to their defense, or shapeshift into a tyrannosaurus Tyrannosaurus Rex. Druidic orders, or circles, come in many varieties, centered around all sorts of natural phenomena, like different types of land, the moon, the stars, fungal spores, or shepherds. Between being full spellcasters and their sometimes clunky shape-shifting abilities, druids might very well be too complex to manage for some beginners, landing them in the D tier of both magical simplicity and ease of use. But it has to be said that they have access to unique spells and super useful abilities, which do make them a natural addition to any party. Hey, I want to pause right now and ask, after that really bad joke, if you do me a favor and hit that like and subscribe button for me down below and hit the little bell icon so you'll get notified whenever I release new content. Alright, back to the video. Next, the fighter. Let's not kid ourselves, most of Dungeons & Dragons rules are rules concerning combat, and the fighter is the premier combat character. A master of every kind of weapon and armor, tough and capable of both making and taking devastating attacks, fighters are relied on to deliver consistent punishment to enemies over the duration of a campaign day, whether it be in the vanguard with a great sword, in the rear with a longbow, or defending down party members with a shield and spear. Fighters are the most popular class in D&D, and they come in a wide variety of types with a diverse range of complexity, from the beginner-friendly champion and the survivable samurai to the more nuanced battle master and the magical eldritch knight, from psionic warriors to mounted cavaliers. The advantages of the fighter class are their ease of play, their durability, their customizability, and their undeniable power, and the fact that by later levels you'll be making so many attacks, even you start to feel kind of bad for the monsters. Beginners and newer players definitely can, should, and do play fighters, landing them in the S tier of both ease of use and magical simplicity, with a slight exception for the Eldritch Knight. Next, the Monk. Monks are masters of body and mind, taking many of their mechanical notes from Kung Fu cinema. They harness a special magic-like power called Qi, or Chi, an element that flows through every living body, which allows them to push their capabilities past what their regular physical form could normally accomplish. This includes rapid-fire unarmed blows, stunning strikes that render foes senseless, and extraordinarily fast movement speed. Monks are super cool, and magically they're pretty simple, but monks can be pretty difficult to play for newcomers, landing them solidly in the C tier for ease of use for beginners. Monks face a number of mechanical complexities that make them harder to play, as well as some imbalanced features and a batch of less than stellar subclasses. But nonetheless, monks are a whole ton of fun to play, because slapping monsters silly never gets old. Next, the Paladin. Paladins are oath-bound warriors, ostensibly committed to upholding justice and righteousness, and devoted to crushing their enemies with religious fanaticism. They may or may not be in service to a deity or a higher entity, but all paladins have divine power, used to aid their allies and smite their foes with unparalleled degree. This divine magic aptitude is connected to their sacred oaths, which define the ideals and thus the flavor of each type of paladin. Paladins may be committed to selfless virtues, ancient light, or holy vengeance. Paladins are partial spellcasters, with easy enough to learn magic, so despite being a little multi-ability dependent, with reliance on both strength and charisma, paladins are a pretty simple class to figure out for beginners, landing them in the A tier for both categories. The paladin is tough, violently dangerous, and surprisingly self-sufficient, so for beginners willing to take the oath, I highly recommend this class. Next, the ranger. Rangers are masters of the wilderness, trained in conclaves that are devoted to protecting the margins of civilization from wild and unknown horror. Rangers get the party through dangerous territory through their knowledge of terrain, flora, and fauna. They can track enemies naturally, and they have access to magic that can augment their vital role as the party's scout and survival expert. Rangers are also really good at stacking their damage output, making them very valuable in combat. Partial spellcasters, the ranger's nature magic is pretty easy to learn. The ranger's stats are based on dexterity and wisdom, making them mechanical mirrors of the paladins. With a slightly bigger learning curve than the pals, they land in the B tier of both categories, but they still make another great choice for beginner players out there that want to try their hands at playing a martial, magical character that really packs a serious punch. Next, the rogue. Rogues are preeminent skill monkeys and masters of stealth. The latter also makes them capable of deadly surprise attacks, waiting for opportune moments to make devastating surgical strikes. Rogues are often inveterate criminals, as their name might imply, skilled in lifting wallets, picking locks, disarming traps, and forging forging fake IDs. Rogues come in a variety of flavors, but all lend themselves to their role as a savvy strategist, stealth scout, or a mobile ambusher, while remaining relatively simple to build. Rogues are reliant on dexterity, with an open-ended option for the rest of their abilities. Rogues aren't difficult to build, and they're very beginner-friendly, landing them in the S tier for both categories. So if you're new to D&D and you're interested in playing a sneaky thief or a shadowy assassin, or both, look no further, because this is your home. Next, the Sorcerer. Sorcerers are innately possessed of their magical abilities, inherent in their being, whether through a bloodline or cosmic connection. And they learn to tap their latent potential to unleash immense arcane power. As opposed to a wizard that learns magic through study, or a bard that taps it through art and sound, sorcerers' abilities come from within. Sorcerers come in many different types, but their greatest asset is their ability to use metamagic, abilities that allow the sorcerer to twist the very rules of magic and allow them to push their inherent powers to accomplish feats beyond the capabilities of any other magic-using class. Sorcerers rely on their charisma for spellcasting and constitution to stay alive. Sorcerers aren't always ideal for beginners due to some odd complexities they have. They have a good spell list, but most sorcerers actually know comparatively few spells. Metamagic options are powerful, but they can also be confusingly worded or executed, and their subclasses are really poorly balanced, ranging from god tier to landing them in the C tier for both spellcasting simplicity and ease of use for beginners. But all that said, sorcerers are still super fun and extremely powerful, so if you're interested in playing a more specialist sort of spellcaster, I recommend giving it a look. Next, the Warlock. Warlocks are unlike any other magic users. Their arcane aptitude and their personal ambitions have led them to form a pact with an otherworldly being of immense power. The terms and details of the pact will vary widely from warlock to warlock, but a typical pact with an otherworldly being, called a patron, involves a measure of the patron's power, usually in implicit exchange for services performed by the warlock, although the situation isn't uniform. Sometimes a patron isn't even aware of the warlock's existence. Warlocks rely on their charisma for their spells, much like bards and sorcerers. The flavor and particular function of a warlock often depends on their patron, which will affect stuff like what spells they can cast and what special warlock abilities they may gain access to. Warlocks are intensely popular for multi-classing, which is something I'll detail in depth in another video, but single-class warlocks are also some of the more complex builds in Dungeons & Dragons, since they have so many decision points and their resource pools work differently, with much fewer spell slots over the adventuring career compared to other spellcasters, and much more reliant on short rests. I don't think a warlock is an ideal beginner's pick unless you want to do a lot of reading, but they're definitely in the C to D tier of both magical simplicity and ease of use. But honestly, don't let that stop you if you're into this vibe, because warlocks are insanely fun. Next, the Wizard. Wizards are perhaps the most iconic character class of Dungeons & Dragons. Wizards differ from other spellcasters in that they don't derive their magic from godly sources like clerics or paladins, nor do they receive it innately like sorcerers, nor do they summon it from the fabric of nature like druids or rangers. No, wizards hit the books hard. Wizards rely on their intelligence, and they devote years of academic study to their arcane, taking an intellectual's approach in learning and using magic. As a result, wizards are the most versatile and adaptable of all the spellcasters in D&D, maybe even of any D&D class, because their spell list is massive, and it includes virtually all the best spells in the game, outside of healing spells. Wizards are also not bound to being limited to a number of spells they can know, like most other classes, since they can simply copy down spells into their spellbook, a staple prop of the wizard and the basis of practically all their magic. There are as many wizard types as there are clerics, devoted to every school of magic, specialties ranging to predicting the future to being really good at casting fireball. Complexity of the wizard mostly involves learning the phone book of spells they can use, so I'm not sure I recommend this class for a brand new beginner. That is, unless you love the idea of having a hefty tome full of spells and then actually reading, learning, and understanding what all of those spells can do, in which case the wizard is actually probably the best class in the game for you. So that's it. Those are currently the 12 official classes of Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, plus the Artificer, because it should be official. That's it for today, folks. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and hit the little bell icon down below to see more of my content. Thanks so much for watching, and until next time, stay friendly.